Training Module 4.5 Biomass Production. In this module, we focus on the simulation of biomass production. The learning objective of this module is to understand how AquaCrop simulates biomass production. First of all, we will describe what is biomass water productivity. And subsequently, we will see how it needs to be adjusted. In AquaCrop, a distinction is made between crop transpiration and soil evaporation. Soil evaporation is non-productive consumptive use of water. Biomass production is proportional to transpiration. Crop takes up water by its roots, the water is transported to the leaves and will escape through the stomata by transpiration. The same pathway is used by the CO2, so CO2 is taken up through the stomata, and by photosynthesis we produce carbohydrates, which are the building blocks of the biomass production. So biomass production is proportional to the cumulative transpiration. That is the conceptual relation which is at the core of AquaCrop. This slide shows the linear relationship which exists between the cumulative crop transpiration and the biomass production. The biomass water productivity corresponds with the slope of the line. Biomass is calculated by multiplying the cumulative crop transpiration with the biomass water productivity. The biomass water productivity expresses the biomass which is produced per unit of water lost by transpiration. Kilogram biomass per square meter per millimeter of water transpired. The biomass water productivity, however, is only valid for a specific climatic condition and CO2 concentration. To make the water productivity applicable to diverse locations and seasons and other CO2, we need to normalize the water productivity. WP becomes WP star. The normalized water productivity is now corrected for the climate. We use ET0 as the climate index. Instead of plotting B versus the sum of transpiration, we plot now B versus the sum of transpiration divided by the daily ET0. And the new slope of the line is now the normalized water productivity. The normalized water productivity is valid for one specific CO2 concentration, namely for the reference CO2 concentration, which is taken for the year 2000 and equal to 369.41 parts per million. In next slides, we will see how we are going to adjust the WP star for CO2 concentrations in other years. In step 1 of the simulation, we simulate canopy cover. This determines the crop coefficient, and as such we can simulate transpiration. If we now know the value of transpiration in step 2, then we can calculate in step 3 the biomass production by considering the normalized water productivity. Let's now look at adjustments. The first one is the effect of CO2 concentration on biomass production. Climatic data consist of rainfall data, ET0, and temperature data. Additionally, also the mean annual CO2 concentration has to be specified. We see that for future climatic conditions, the CO2 is increasing. This has an effect on the biomass water productivity. When the CO2 concentration increases and becomes above the CO2 concentration for the year 2000, which is 369.47 parts per million, the slope of the line increases and more biomass production can be produced per unit of water transpired. Another adjustment consider the difference between the vegetative and the yield formation stage for particular crops. This adjustment accounts for differences in the chemical composition of the vegetative biomass and the harvestable origins. Typically for crops which makes oils like soybean, like sunflower, so you need a lot of carbohydrates to make 1 kilogram of oil. And as such, the relationship between transpiration, actually the uptake of CO2, and the biomass production will become smaller if during the yield formation, during which you make those oils. Let me show you that in AquaCrop. Let's look at the crop characteristics of sunflowers. The water productivity is given in the production tab sheet, and I can see that the normalized water productivity for the sunflowers is 18 grams per square meter. That is true in the vegetative stage. However, in the yield formation stage, the normalized water productivity declines to a value of 10.8 grams per square meter, taking into account the production of the oily products. The normalized water productivity and the adjustment in the yield formation stage are conservative crop factors which the user has not to tune to the environment. So far, we have looked at the effect of the CO2 concentration and the difference of biomass production in vegetative and in yield formation stage. In a final step, we are going now to consider some stresses on the biomass production. It is the cold stress, and it is simulated by a Ks coefficient. This slide shows the effect of cold stress on the biomass production. When it gets colder, the production decreases because the temperature stress coefficient becomes smaller than 1. This slide shows you the stress coefficient for low temperature in function of the indicator, and the indicator are growing degree days. When we have 0 growing degree days, it means that the base temperature is equal to the mean temperature of the day. Then there is no biomass production. When it gets warmer, when the average temperature is above the base temperature, the biomass production is going to increase. But it will only become at its full potential at the upper threshold. As long as the average temperature is below the upper threshold, biomass production is reduced due to cold stress. Reduced light intensities, shorter days, will also result in low temperature. So the stress coefficient for lower temperature integrates actually the effect of low temperature, reduced light intensities, and shorter days. This slide gives an overview of the factors affecting the simulation of the above-ground biomass. Step 1, we calculate canopy cover. Since we know canopy cover, we can calculate transpiration in step 2. In step 3, the biomass production is given by this equation. Biomass production is proportional to the cumulative sum of the transpiration corrected for ET0. The proportional factor is the normalized biomass water productivity, which is crop specific. It is adjusted for CO2 concentrations, and for some of the crops it is adjusted according to the synthesized product. Are these leaves or are these oil? Finally, the biomass production is also affected by stresses. We consider temperature stress, and in another module we look at the effect of soil fertility stress.